Hello everyone and welcome to our session, Energy for Sustainable Future. We have today four short presentations and after that a panel discussion. And our expert speakers include Timo Rotovius, Petra Berg and myself, Heidi Hirsto from the University of Vaasa and Suvi Monni from Sitowise. So we will start with the expert talks and we invite you all to join then in the panel discussion with your questions and insights. So let's have a good discussion. But now I would like to welcome Timo Rotovius, first speaker.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to present my ideas here. Nice to see that there is so many people listening to my presentation. So my name is Timo Rotovius. I'm a professor of finance in the University of Vaasa. So I'm not an expert on energy. I'm an expert on finance. So I may be looking at this thing in a little bit different perspective than the other speakers over there. So. Let's go on. So first of all, why do we need an energy transition? So there is a table which are the safest and cleanest sources of energy. And as we can see, what the world is using now, coal, oil, and so on, they are not good. The greenhouse gas emissions are very high, and also they are not safe. So a lot of people are dying because of the using of this coal, oil, and also natural gas. But then we have these new energy sources, such as solar, wind, and also nuclear energy. And of course, we also need hydro power because we need something to level off the problems in the solar and wind. So we all know that we get a lot of energy from solar when it's shining. We get a lot of energy from wind when it's windy, but not in the other times. So getting out of coal and oil, if we look at like this, so this is about electricity generation. So the share of coal, for example, the red one here, it's going down. But everybody I hope, can understand what is a problem in this picture. This is not happening now. Or actually, this is happening, but this is not the picture that we should be looking at. The truth is that demand for electricity is going up all the time. For example, IMF forecasts that it will go up until 2050, about 50%. So it means that, for example, the coal, we are not using less coal, even though this looks like we are using less coal. No, that's not true. We are using more and more coal every day. So the consumption of coal is going up until 2050, what we have forecast for. And the same goes for oil. So they are going up, not down. And that's a big picture today. So we are building a lot of new wind energy, solar energy, but still, also these fossil fuels, they are going up, not down. So the fossil fuels account for about 79%, so almost 80% of the world's energy production today. And the reason for this is that they are traditionally very inexpensive, so the costs are very low. And in the same time, the price for solar energy and wind power, it has been going down. So today, for example, solar energy is very cheap, and also wind energy. So for example, the modules for producing solar power, it's very cheap, about 120 euros per kilowatt today. So it's almost nothing. So you can use this for 30 years. So the price for, if you divide it for these 30 years, it's almost zero. And this is why the renewables nowadays account for about 30% of the global electricity output. So this is good. So we are now producing a lot of renewable energy, which is fine. And we are, in the world, we are doing a lot of investments in energy. So for example, last year we invested 2.8 trillion US dollars in energy totally. And from this, about 1.7 trillion went to the clean energy or new technologies in green technologies. But it doesn't include only the renewables like solar, wind, hydro, geothermal and so on. But it also, this figure, it also includes, for example, electric vehicles. And we know how much they are producing those today. Also nuclear power, grids and storage, that's a big portion. Low emission fuels, efficiency improvements and heat pumps. So we are, I would say that we are investing only 1.7 trillion into these new technologies. So very little comparably to renewable energy. But in total we are investing 2.8 trillion. So this means that we are still investing a lot of money in fossil fuels. Almost as much as in renewables, which may be shocking for some people. And the reason for this is, of course there are many reasons, but one reason is that we are still paying, in the world, we are paying a lot of subsidies for fossil fuel. And what might be shocking is that it's the share of these subsidies, it's going up, it's not going down, it's going up. This is according to IMF. Until 2030, the subsidies for fossil fuel is going up. So of course there are different kinds of subsidies. I'm not going to go through that so much, but the picture here is that the subsidies for fossils are going up. And according to IMF, if we want to change, so this is where we would like to be. So we would like to have the greenhouse gas emissions going down. Now, if we follow this trend that we are doing now, we are going over here. But if we want to go here, it means that we have to decrease those subsidies. So, in my opinion, we are not going anywhere right now. In Finland, when we look at this problem from our own perspective, it's completely different here in Finland. But in the world, we are going in a different direction. And this is mainly because of the non-OECD countries. They are investing a lot of money in fossil fuel, still today. And this is the path where we are now. So we are not going down, we are going up. And if we want to go down, according to IMF, we have to skip those subsidies for fossil fuels worldwide. On the other hand, we know that the production cost for renewable energy is going down. So for example, wind and solar energy, it's almost nothing today. It's about 2-3 cents. If we take everything into account, also the financing cost and so on. So the price for this energy is very low. So that's why we are, in the OECD countries, we are putting a lot of money into renewable energy. It's a good investment, or it has been a good investment, as we all know. So this is the same picture. So this is solar power. We can see that in 10 years it has come down from there to here. And also the wind power, onshore wind power, it has also done the same. And this gray area here is the price for the fossil fuels. So we are not very much below these. So these are still, if we compare for concentrating solar power, for example, it's still pretty expensive. And this is, a big portion of this is because of the subsidies. Not, of course, the only source, but one explanation for this are the subsidies. And now when we have invested a lot of money in renewables, of course there are some kind of problems, or many problems. And one problem is that when there is a lot of sun shining, for example, the price of the electricity is very low. And this is a statistic where we can see that, for example, if you look at Australia, so this gives that what percentage share of electricity production is coming from the sun. And the higher this proportion is, the higher is the number of days here in the red when the price of the electricity is red. And somebody might think that this is a good thing, but it's not, because it also means that if this is the case, when you can produce a lot of energy, you get nothing, and when you can't produce anything, you would get a lot of money. So this is not good, as we all understand. So this is one problem in the renewables. We get a lot of energy when we don't need it, and we don't get anything when we would need it. And in investors' point of view, this is a very big problem. So is the price that we get, even though it's very cheap to produce, for example, solar energy, but is the price big enough in this case? And as we can see, for example, from this table, is that this is from the last year. We can see that this is the renewable energy. The companies that are producing renewable energy, so this is the stock price of those companies. And this is the price of those companies that are producing fossil fuel energy. So we see that it's not necessarily so that the new energy investments would be good ones. It may be that the better place to invest are the fossil fuels. If you look only at the return on your money, if you don't care anything about anything else, you just look at the money, then it has been, for example, last year, it would be so that you should have put all your money in fossil fuel, not in renewables. But still, if we look at the big picture, of course we have to get rid of the CO2 emissions. That's we all of us, we understand it. And the reason why we should do that is not that they are not necessarily they are better business than fossil fuel. The reason that we have to do it is that otherwise we can't, in a couple of decades, we can't live here anymore if we don't do it. So we would have to be able to do it anyways. And then, for example, the government subsidies, they play a big role in this change. But if we look at the investing in renewables, there are, of course, a lot of opportunities. We know that there is a big demand for renewable energy. So, for example, the companies now, at least in developed countries, they are willing to pay a lot of money for pure energy. They don't want to use anything anymore, the fossil fuels. They are willing to pay more for renewable energy because they want to be clean. Then, of course, there are cost reductions. If we invest in, for example, solar power or wind power, we know that the price is going down. So it's every day it's better and better deal in that sense. But also there is a big demand for flexibility because of the problem that I just showed. So, for example, hydropower is very valuable in the future, and also this pumped hydro power. So that might be one very good investment source. But we know that, for example, in Finland, hydropower, it's not, nobody's investing in that at the moment. They are asking for subsidies from government because it can't compete with, for example, solar power. And that's a problem because when we don't have solar power, we have to then use fossil fuel. It would be much better to have hydropower. Then, of course, there are investment opportunities in batteries and hydrogen maybe in the future. It remains to be seen, but it may be, in the future, it may be a big one. So what we need are the policy changes. We should look for those. They may be good, they may be bad, depending on what kind of subsidies there are. Or should there even be a ban on fossil fuels? That would, of course, make it even more faster. Then there are, of course, challenges in investing renewables. As I described earlier, there are structurally falling margins. So the margins when you sell, for example, solar or wind energy, the price is going down all the time. The fluctuating generation, it's a big problem. Then we have to invest a lot of money in the grids and also in the future in the storage. So that also increases the price that we can get, decreases the price that we can get from the wind and solar energy, because we know that we have to store it for the future. So it means that it will be more expensive than it is today. And of course then the financing problems. Who is going to finance all this? And we know that it has been very lucrative so far, but what happens in a couple of years? Is it lucrative anymore? It may be that because of these problems, this thing is going down. So what I'm saying is that there are mega trends now going on. So we are investing in the world, we are investing a lot of money in the renewables, but we have to remember that we are also investing a lot of money in the fossil fuels. So if you are just an investor who doesn't care anything about anything else, you just look at the return on your money, then the renewables may not be the best case to invest. It may be that the fossil fuels are better. Who knows in the future what is the case, but what we need is that the governments should handle this thing, not only in Europe and US and in other developed countries, but the most important is that we could get the non-OECD countries as well in this game, which is not so easy to do as it is to say. So thanks, this is what I have to say. Maybe we take the questions afterwards.
So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at this seminar. My name is Suvi Monni. I come from Sitowise. It's a Nordic company which provides expert services and digital solutions for the built environment, energy sector, and industry. And I work there as a sustainability service director, so I'm looking at sustainability aspects and new business opportunities from sustainability in all these fields. And when we talk about sustainability, we actually talk about the biggest challenges of today and how we are going to address them. The climate change is accelerating, as everybody knows. I think everyone has either experienced or at least seen in the news, like the urban flooding or forest fires, increased winter winds. We also still live in a linear economy, which means that basically items are being produced, they're being used and thrown away. Like circular economy has not accelerated as fast as it was hoped. Biodiversity is also decreasing all the time. We are losing species and we are losing also entire habitats. And this is not only about nature, it's also about humanity, because we depend on nature. If we don't have pollinators, it would be very difficult to provide food for all the people living in this planet. And there are also a number of other sustainability issues. And the tricky thing is that all of these are connected, and they are connected in quite complex ways. So even if we mitigate one of the sustainability problems, we may mitigate also at the same time others, but we also may increase some other sustainability problems at the same time. So this whole system is very complex. But what this then means for companies? Sustainability is actually becoming more and more a business driver. So it's not only that businesses should think about sustainability because it's like the right thing to do for the planet, it has also an impact on their business. Like McKinsey and Company just recently published a study where they found out that companies that achieve a better growth and profitability than their peers, while they improve the sustainability at the same time, they outgrow their peers and they exceed them in shareholder returns. So this actually means that sustainability also has a direct business impact in various sectors, and this impact is positive. There's also like a growing number of institutional investors which take sustainability into account. So of course then, if there are like sustainability criteria and the price of the loan, for example, is better, if the project is more sustainable, this again has a direct business impact. There is also a growing amount and coverage of sustainability legislation, and those companies which prepare early, they get the competitive advantage. And what we can see also in the renewable energy sector is that the stakeholder expectations are growing. So there's more and more risks related to additional assessment and mitigation costs and delayed regulatory approval. So if the stakeholders see the project as a kind of positive light, then there is more probability that there won't be that many complaints. So improving the sustainability of the project and also communicating it efficiently can also speed up the project and provide economic benefits from that side. But sustainability is like a very wide topic, and therefore it's very important to understand where to focus. And this can be done by so-called materiality assessment, or nowadays we actually talk about double materiality assessment. So this means that you look at the impact, you look at like the impact your business has on the society and the environment. But then you also look at this the other way around. Like what kind of impact the sustainability issues in the society and environment have on your business, what risks and opportunities there are. And now actually even legislation is pushing companies to do this double materiality assessment. So to understand what kind of sustainability impacts the companies have on these sustainability aspects shown in this table. But what's more, this legislation also requires that companies report on how they mitigate these material sustainability risks and how they pursue the material opportunities. So this is also a clear call for action from the legislation side. I will next dive into two of these sustainability issues. One is climate change and one is biodiversity. So from the renewable energy perspective. And as was also explained, I think, in Timo's presentation, is that renewable energy is a key thing for climate change mitigation. The scientists have concluded that at the moment we are 1.1 centigrades above the global average temperatures in pre-industrial times, and 1.5 degrees would be like the safe margin. It would be like the safe number. If we go above it, we will have more and more like dangerous climate change impacts, and we are more likely to reach tipping points, which means like points where there is no return, where we cannot come back to the current climate, whatever we do. And actually the International Renewable Energy Agency estimated that in order to be able to reach this 1 point, or to limit the temperature growth to 1.5 degrees, we should triple the amount of renewable energy globally by 2030. This would need like a very, very fast growth, very big change globally. And of course, this urgent need for climate change mitigation, it provides a lot of opportunities for the renewable energy sector. But even though the impacts are generally positive, or they are largely positive, there is also carbon footprint associated with renewable energy production, and it's also important to take this into account, like in the entire life cycle. So we should look at the impacts from the raw material extraction to manufacturing, transportation, use phase, and disposal or recycling. And in order to find solutions there, it's important to look at like resource efficiency, new innovative materials, and use the circular economy principles. But again, like if we look at climate change mitigation, renewable energy is very much on the positive side. But the situation is quite different with biodiversity, because renewable energy needs a lot of land. It needs much more land than conventional power production. And usually when land use is involved, there are also impacts on biodiversity. For example, there may be habitat loss and degradation that's related to like vegetation clearance or soil disturbance or the changes in surface water flows. There's also habitat fragmentation, which means that there could be like physical barriers to animals or barrier effects to migratory species, for example, in wind power farms. Then there may be like behavior changes in the animals. They avoid the construction, they avoid the production phase, and therefore this changes where these animals live. And there's also some direct wildlife mortality. For example, some birds, they mistake the solar panels with water and they may try to land in there. And then when we have multiple projects, there are cumulative impacts which are actually quite complex and they are often not assessed because each project is being assessed like one at a time. But the good news is that the biodiversity impacts, they can be mitigated, they can be avoided, minimized, restored, or offset. So in this graph, we have first here like no net loss. So if we are at this line, there is no net impact on nature. If we are above this line, there is positive impact on nature, and if we are below, there is negative impact on nature. And let's say like that a renewable energy project first has this potential negative impact in this orange bar. Then first, these impacts can be avoided, and their site selection is very important to do risk screening comprehensively to avoid sites with high biodiversity values or sites which have like high biodiversity values nearby, so they would be impacted. Then when we are on the site, then the impacts can be minimized. For example, there can be changes in the project infrastructure or changes in the scheduling of construction activities to avoid disturbing the species in their sensitive periods of the year. Restoration activities can be made, which means like bringing the nature back that has been disturbed, for example, after construction. The site could be revegetated using indigenous plants from the site. And then in the end, the rest of the project impacts could be offset. And here, like compensation and offset, it's quite often actually like confused with carbon offsets, and this is a different thing. When we talk about ecological compensation, we talk about negative impacts on nature that are compensated somewhere else by improving the state of nature. So in this case, this project would actually have a net positive impact on nature when all these steps have been taken. And actually then, like involving local community and utilizing the local knowledge to maximize the benefits for both the society and the environment, it may in the end transform all these risks into opportunities when also people feel they are involved and their knowledge is being used and valued. So some key takeaways from this presentation: renewable energy is a key solution to keeping the global warming between 1.5 and 2 centigrades, but still sustainability risks exist, in particular in relation to resource use and biodiversity. In order to tackle these risks, it's important to understand the materiality of each sustainability aspect. And I think in finding solutions, it would be important to be open for innovations, and it's also very important to use science-based approaches because this helps then to prevent the risk of any greenwashing claims. Thank you very much for your listening. Thanks.
Thank you, Timo and Sui, for your wonderful presentations this far. It's good to continue from this. I'm Heidi Hirsto. I'm associate professor in University of Vaasa in communication studies. I'm specialized in organizational communication, leadership communication, and also we have a really nice project on investment cultures, where we talk about values and discourses related to investing, which is also very relevant here. But I think the previous speakers have laid out the dimensions and importance of sustainability quite nicely, so I can jump right into the communication perspective. So I'm talking from the perspective of corporations, business companies, and their CSR or sustainability communication. So sustainability in this picture is a kind of an outcome of taking into account environmental, social, and economic impacts of business at all levels and in all processes. And communication plays a key role in this. We need to tell others that we are and we want to be sustainable. And we also need to tell ourselves in an organization that we are and we want to be sustainable. We need to have systems and processes and practices of communication in place that help us to take sustainability into account at every step in the process. This is one way of thinking about the key ideals and purpose of sustainability communication. The ultimate goal is to build trust among our stakeholders. Trust in our will and capability of advancing sustainability. And in order to do this, we need to share information openly. But we also need to make the information transparent in a way that is understandable for our stakeholders, that it's relevant for our stakeholders. And we need to understand that transparency is ultimately, the point of transparency is accountability. Its point is to enable critical evaluation and assessment and responsibility. Yes, so why would this be so threatening to anyone? I will give you 3 points in this presentation. The number one threat that many associate with sustainability communication or CSR communication is that it costs money and it requires effort. We do not only need to act responsibly, we also need to communicate that we are responsible. It's costly, it might be inefficient, it's difficult. We need to learn new standards and regulations, and we need to produce data, we need to measure things, we need to analyze. It will cost money. But the solution to this threat is also very simple in a way. We need to think about sustainability communication as a central part of strategic management. Stakeholders are increasingly paying attention to environmental and ethical questions, and shareholders and partners do not want to take any additional risks in terms of environmental ethical reputation of the company. So in this sense, the non-communication and poor communication is a far bigger threat for the reputation of the company and the trust we are trying to build. The second threat is to see communication only as reporting. We need to report. This is also required by law and regulations. But reporting entails a pretty old-fashioned understanding of communication as one way, sharing of information, focusing on the past. So there are 3 things wrong in this idea. Reporting also focuses on quantifiable phenomena, on numbers, things that we can measure and quantify, and leaves a lot of things unaccounted for. Reporting is also very resource intensive because we need to gather data and analyze data. But interestingly, it's also restricting in the sense that because all companies need to report the same things and use the same categories, it might be difficult to emphasize and focus on the things that are relevant to this exact business or this field or our company. So it might lead to sidelining central issues. And obviously, reporting does not reach all relevant stakeholders. So the answer to that is more multi-channel, or understanding sustainability communication as a multi-channel and forward-looking communication. Reporting is still important. We need to give metrics that stakeholders can use in their decision-making. It's also important as a form of auto-communication, in a sense that not only the product of reporting is important, but the process of compiling a report helps the organization understand and revise and confirm its own values and goals. So it's also targeted at themselves. Okay, so then investor relations is also a place for sustainability communication. Investors look at the key figures and use them as criteria, but they also look at any other information that they can get, for example, in earnings calls and personal interaction, anything that they can get to make assessments of the outlook and risks of the company in the short run, but also in the long run. Sustainability communication is also about building public relations. This is about becoming a responsible corporate citizen locally, nationally, and globally. And obviously, sustainability communication is also closely related to marketing communication. This is about building trust towards consumers and also B2B clients, and essentially about building a credible, sustainable brand. Social media is in these days a crucial arena where the sustainability commitments and claims of the company are put into test. So this is a place where stakeholders can actually participate and make and take the company accountable for its communication, its words and its actions. And it's also a place where a company can reach value communities and, for example, influencers that represent the same values as they do. And last but not least, sustainability communication happens also within the organization as part of internal communication. It should be integrated in strategy work, leadership communication, and building a responsible organizational culture. So we are moving from reporting something that we have done this far towards the ongoing building of a sustainable identity and brand. Okay, threat 3 is washes. So obviously when stakeholders are expecting great deeds from us and they are expecting us to be green and progressive, there's a threat that we might end up exaggerating how green and progressive we actually are. Greenwashing and the other forms of washing are about misleading stakeholders. And it's about a gap between our visions and our promises and what we actually do. And this reduces trust. From a communication theory perspective, the answer to this can be called aspirational talk. It means that not all visionary communication is a problem or should be seen as a problem. The greenwashing idea is based on the idea that words and action are separate, but the aspirational talk perspective treats words and communication also as a form of action in itself. It's important for the company to put out hopeful and progressive messages. They change public discussion. They make the goals and commitments of the company publicly available so that they can be worked upon, they can be followed, they can be criticized, and also stakeholders can then push organizations to make the gap smaller. So I'm sorry for the very small picture, but the gap is not the problem as such. We always have a gap between the visions and goals that we strive for and the actual reality of this moment. But the main thing is what we do with this gap when we notice it and it causes tension. So that do we just close our eyes or take cynical distance, or do we invite and encourage struggle and debate and discussion so that we can bring reality closer to the vision? So this is what is important, and it has everything to do with communication and the systems of communication that we have in place. So just to wrap up, communication is essential to strategy making. Communication is dialogical, persuasive, engaging, and communication is performative. It makes things happen. Thank you.
Okay, hello everybody. And my name is Petra Berg, and I work at the, I have 10 minutes, School of Marketing and Communication at the University of Vaasa. I also work as a project manager at the VEBIC, so Vaasa Energy Business Innovation Center, and there a project called ReadySet, which is about resilient, digitalized, sustainable energy transition. So at the moment, I'm doing quite a lot of research about this new third layer to the energy transition, which is the digital, and there the cybersecurity. But today, I'm going to talk more about my core research, which is then again this kind of root issues in sustainability, or more why we are still unsustainable. And I've been looking into energy-related issues the last 10 years, and also teaching. And I had quite a few problems finding out what I should say in 10 minutes, so let's see what's going to happen. I'm going to try to lead you quickly through some quite critical points. I told Elina, okay, I could talk about speed blindness or something, and she took that, and I was like, okay, what did I promise? I was using AI Copilot, actually, I wanted some nice pictures, and then it was like giving me this definition. I was like, okay, thank you, you made my life a bit easier. So actually I agree here that this is basically what I thought about saying, about what I mean with speed blindness, and that is that we have a tendency to prioritize rapid progress, especially in our culture, in our short-term gains, because that's how the system is wired right now, instead of actually thinking about long-term environmental and social impacts. So. And then my dear new friend Copilot also asked me, so do you want some examples of speed blindness? I was like, okay, shoot. So it produced these pictures and also gave me quite a nice list. And actually this list I'm going to go through really quickly because I want to talk a little bit more about root causes, and I only have 10 minutes. So quick fixes, yes, most of you would agree. Rushed renewable energy projects, something that's quite a lot in the media, I think not only in Finland. Infrastructure development, if it's rushed again, a lot of problems. I think your presentation was really showing that they are only those climate and environment are like many times outweighing each other. Greenwashing, as Heidi was saying, short-term profit maximization, and ignoring stakeholder input. So I think we covered that quite well in the previous presentations. Okay, what to do? The same, try to prevent that. Long-term vision, yes, holistic assessment, stakeholder engagement, regulation, education, sustainable design, monitoring and adoption, transparency. Actually, things we know. And the thing is, sustainability is nothing new. That's been since the Club of Rome, I think it was in the 50s. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring in the 70s. We've had this discussion for a long time. So, what's the problem? I think right now things are speeding up a little bit, but it comes with its new challenges, a little bit like digitalization comes with totally new challenges for the energy transition as well. And I'm trying not to talk about that because that's another thing. One issue I would like to start with why there might be more deep things, problems than we think, is that we are constantly bombarded with bad news. Our media today is basically wired to scare us with one thing or another. I don't know if anybody will disagree, you can disagree if you want, but I would say the last 6 years have been just worsening and worsening. If we're not dying of that, we're dying of that. Marketing and behavioral research shows that people, if you want long-term effects, behavioral change, scare tactics are not, they don't work. They will actually, on the long term, do the opposite. We will revert back to what feels safe. And as those drivers, we're going to go into that a little bit more, are internal, we might not even really understand why we're doing what we're doing. Very quickly, first, sustainability and energy transitions, because this is something that many times is a bit of a like, how do you understand what something means? Energy transitions and sustainability transitions doesn't equal. They don't necessarily mean the same thing. Green transition is not necessarily a sustainable transition. And this is often, I see it getting mixed up in a lot of media and discussions. Sustainability transitions nowadays is a research area, like there's a lot of people researching that. And there, actually, more and more, it's about unsustainability transitions. So that discussion is coming up. Okay, I got 5 minutes. So that's focused on how to make a transition really sustainable. And then again, energy transitions are historically very slow processes. Now, the green transition is evolving quite quickly. We are trying to make a really big jump. And I would a little bit be saying here, I wanted to take a critical approach, so I would say it might even be more of an ideology now, as it's so political. And that has its own implications. Just to give you a quick glimpse of how we usually look at all the different factors affecting just the system. So we talk in transition research, it's about usually using the MLP, which is multi-level perspective. And there we say that the regime is the system maintaining itself. And you have all these different functions. Human society, technology, economy, everything together, working together to maintain something. And now imagine that we're actually, with this transition, we're trying to shift all of that at once. What's the problem then in the existing system? Well, we have vested interests, as Timo was talking about, sunk investments. When you invest a lot of money in something, you're not going to give it up the next 5 years because suddenly you realize that was really unsustainable. Let's not go in on any examples here. Social cognitive routines, behavioral patterns, culture, and politics and power. Jukka left. So politics, while you have power, why would you like to give it away? There might be some interests there. Okay, finally into the core then. Dominant social paradigm. That comes then from micro-marketing research, and that is saying that all of us individuals are born into a social-cultural system, so we're embedded into a set of beliefs, habits, and values, and so on. And as that is the world we know when we get born into it, it is almost impossible for us to question it. So we learn as we are taught. I think somebody said that the hardest thing for me was actually to unlearn what I was taught. And in a way, we also know that now with trying to break this transition, which is actually a lot of habits, we are dealing with how we were brought up to think. Because we are, especially the ones living in the Nordics or Europe or like the Western society, we are very embedded into consumption culture for now. So for us, safety actually equals material well-being. money, and those are internal drivers. And that is why it's so difficult to kind of understand and grasp these complex issues sometimes, especially as consumers are now made very responsible for all the sustainability actions. Whilst again, we are living in an expert system which is very much dependent on very specialized people on very specialized in like very different fields. So you have to trust your doctor, you have to trust the one who sells you the computer, you have to trust that the food producers are saying that the food is what they say, and so I always have to trust a lot of things. But at the same time, you are responsible for all those decisions. So that's a bit of a paradox we're living in right now, I would say, especially with the polarization of societies. 1 minute. So I thought that because I'm giving all these negative inputs about like points at that why this is so bad and all of that, so how could we think about breaking it? For me, we are not just living an energy transition, we're actually living this kind of a paradigm shift. And that means that we are kind of embedded in the old paradigm, and now we're trying to create something. I'm using this symbolism from tarot because I think that Jung and his archetypes is really interesting way of working with symbolism. And the 0, the fool, is the one who starts the new circle. So 21 is like, I don't remember, closest to loop. The fool learns from the old loop and takes the leap of faith towards something else. So I feel like we are a bit like this fool right now because we are trying to create something which hasn't been created before. Our minds are not capable of knowing that, so we have absolutely no safety in what we would actually maybe need to do. And as humans, we tend to navigate towards safety. And this is why it's so increasingly difficult right now, I think, to actually have this balanced and very nuanced conversations, as Heidi was saying, that we would need to bring people together and talk. And I think we are good at bringing people together to fight nowadays. So we are very good at saying, you're either this or this. And it's not just about this woke washing, what was it? That everybody is equal and let's not make anybody sad. It's actually, we should be able to say very different perspectives and collaborate. And I think that's one of the hardest things we're dealing with right now. If we really, really want to go in for the sustainability, and I actually put that, don't use the SDGs, sorry, but it's more like that's a way of making you aware of what's out there. But actually, if we want to do the groundwork, we need to work with models which are more showing us actually what's happening in the environment where we are living. So one last slide, thanks AI again. I was asking it, give me a picture of sustainable society, and it was all the time giving me the picture with this super technical, skiffy version. And then I was like, I want something like this, so I had to write, what was it, old European city. And this is just something which is very strange, that how are we actually envisioning our future? Does everybody, this is just a question, my question, does everybody want to live in that high-tech village? I prefer living there. So, okay, thank you for listening. Onko väliä, missä me istutaan?
Ei, mä voin mennä tonne. Welcome, please, all join our panel, or all our experts. Let's leave the nice vision there on the slide. Let's not. Okay, this is the right slide. So now we have, how much time do we actually have? Here, our expert panel is introduced again, and I'm now asking the questions and taking questions also from the audience. We have a little more than half an hour now to discuss. There's so many things I could start from, but actually I would like to start from investments because, yes, Suvi, you mentioned that the field of sustainable finance is growing and investors are keen to incorporate ESG in their investment decisions. But also, as Timo said, investment is still very strongly flowing to fossil fuels, for example. And in Petra's presentation, for example, you mentioned the prioritizing of short-term gains over long-term benefit, which is something that many investors also might sometimes do. So it seems to me, maybe because I have also been studying the investment discourse, that a big part of a kind of a problem is the investor mindset. Do you agree, or what do you think about this? Do investors only think about money? Is it utopian to think that they could think about something else realistically? And what can we do about this? What can we do about this investor mindset to change it? Do you want to start, Timo?
Do investors think about ESG? Yeah, I would say that in Western world, very, very many investors do. For example, here in Finland, for example, universities are big investors. And also those big funds, and they are, I guess nowadays, they are all very interested in ESGs. But then, of course, there are many other investors. And we can't say that they are all interested or all are not. There are different investors. Most of the people in Western world, they are investors in one way or the other. And some people are interested and some people are not. But what I tried to explain in my presentation is that the Western world, it's not so problematic anymore. The problem now is in the developing countries. And in those countries, they are investing heavily on fossil fuel still. And that's a problem in the world.
Yes, that's very interesting that we need to think about this globally and these global differences in this issue as well. What do you think, Suvi?
Well, first of all, of course, investors have a lot of power. I mean, how they think, what their values are, has a big impact on whether the world is going to change or not. And I think sustainable investing is growing rapidly, but it's still relatively short, like small portion of all the investments. But I think there is the changes like coming, and there is also like new generation of investors for whom like the values are very important. And of course, I think it also depends on the time scale, because I would say if you think like, as Timo said, that if you look at the short-term gains, the fossil fuel industry has been a better investment decision. But what if you look in longer term, at least I believe that in a longer term it wouldn't be a good investment anymore.
Yes, that picture was quite a short term, like 1 year or something. But yeah, we need to come back to this after 10 years maybe, or see what has happened.
Actually, that picture was about on the stock market. So the stock market takes a very, very long look in the future. Mm-hmm. So it's already considered in that one.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean that it's short-sighted.
Yeah. Petra, do you have something?
I think, like for an investor, it's really difficult to know what you're really investing in, if depending on, or sometimes easier, but you need to know. Like it's actually what do you know about what you're investing? Because I've been at least struggling with that I've tried to find out more about certain possibilities, but I've been like giving up because there wasn't enough information, or there were some strange certificates which were like not really what I thought as would be sustainable, and that was served as sustainable. And one comment is that what Timo was presenting is like the end of the pipeline, that's how we look at emissions. But it gets complicated with the fact that it is the whole, like, what do you call it, life cycle. And for example, just with the EVs right now, that do we actually have a complete picture of how much of a pollution there is? They might, at this end of the pipeline, they might be not having any emissions, but where do we get that information? So for me, it's a lot about also the right information, the communication of that information, and the trust. And with the jungle of certificates we have right now, that is increasingly problematic. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I could add that the problem now is that what is sustainable? So investors don't know, nobody knows. For example, nuclear energy, is it sustainable or not? Should we invest in nuclear power? For example, Germans, they have decided that it's not. In Finland, we think that it is. So who is right, who is wrong?
Would you invest in nuclear power?
Me.
Yeah, all you will.
If it's lucrative enough, why not? It's much better than investing in coal or oil, for example. So at least in that respect, it's a good. It's sustainable.
Yeah, it's a really good example of the different standards that different countries take, and some investment funds screen out nuclear power as unsustainable, and others take it in. So we really don't have a consensus in this thing. And also, even for those investment options like gas and oil, fossil fuels that are even more screened out and even less available for ordinary consumers, there are also always investors who can find ways then to profit from that. So it's a very complicated question. Maybe I will ask one more question before we turn into the audience. I was intrigued by the idea of blindness in terms of speed blindness, but I understood the blindness broadly as a phenomenon that organizations and consumers make decisions and moves without understanding the bigger structural or cultural issues, maybe on the system level things. Is this how you meant, or is this accurate?
I would say there are many dimensions to this speed blindness, so I think we can work on the definitions. But yeah, I like yours as well. I think depends a little bit who you're watching, because for businesses and companies who need to do fast decisions often, and they might be very expensive decisions. So the moment you decide this is what we're going to go, you know you're tied to that for some time to come, and also that's like if that goes wrong or that goes right, of course you have to defend your decisions. So they are operating in another time scale than, for example, than private consumers. And then again, politicians and governance, they are operating in another time dimension, maybe. They are all in different dimensions.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think you get the point that I think speed blindness can have a bit of a different definition for depending on which kind of stakeholder group you're looking at.
Yeah. Do you think the blindness can actually be also like strategic, or turning a blind eye to something purposefully?
Are you still asking me?
Yeah, well, I'm still asking you.
Well, I think yes. I think we can blame the speed for a lot of things. We can either do it very unconsciously or we can do it consciously. I think just in our personal life right now, we're having a lot of people who don't keep up with the pace of working life anymore. So there's a lot of that kind of personal things tying up to what's on a more macro level. So what's happening then in business life and overall in society. And I think there you can turn your blind eye to that for, I have to work, I have to do this and this. And actually it kind of keeps you away from making this stopping and watching, like, what am I actually doing? What is happening around me? And I think that's a symptom of our time, and why I think this one paradigm or one era, this kind of industrialized or very mechanistic era, is kind of coming to an end in the way that people are no longer keeping up, especially with the digitalization. So we are forced to something else. But I would say that many are still blaming time and what for actually not maybe taking that little break and asking, okay, what are we really doing? What am I doing? And what's happening? it's very easy to blame your symptoms or your problems on somebody else. And I think that's a societal thing. We're doing a lot of that right now. And I'm waving with my glasses, sorry.
Yes, great. So Petra especially was calling for a system transformation and calling for a systemic approach. Do you think that organizations, businesses, and maybe even regulators think on the system level in an adequate way at this moment? What do you think, Suvi? Or is there a lot of projects like that are done in isolation so that the system level is not being considered?
Yeah, I think it depends on the type of actor, what level they actually should be thinking. I think we cannot require each company or each individual to understand the system level. They are working like in their own sphere. But of course, if we think about like policymakers or those people who make the regulation, they should understand the systemic impacts.
And you had this very nice slide where you showed how projects that may have like negative impact may be corrected step by step so that it has positive effect. I was thinking that is there a danger that we only like look at this particular project and don't look at what's happening in the neighboring area or the impact?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think at the moment, like when renewable energy is increasing, there's kind of, in many places, there's lack of comprehensive understanding of the impacts of all the projects together because they're being like assessed at an individual level, but then the question is who should be thinking about the overall thing? Maybe it's the authorities giving the permits to the plants and even like looking at the land use planning, how much is being planned, but it's a very complex system.
Yes, absolutely, and different actors definitely have different responsibilities in terms of system level thinking. Do you have something, Timo, too?
Yeah, I agree with her. It's if you go back to the nuclear problem, so you can't say that is nuclear, is it sustainable or not? Of course it's not, nothing is, we could say so. But the real question is that compared to what? What Germans did, they chose to shut down all the nuclear plants and instead they start using fossil fuel. So is that sustainable or not? I would say not. So it would have been more sustainable to use nuclear power. So in this case, I agree that we should always look at the whole picture. So if we do something, it means that something else is also happening.
Should at least try, yes. Do we have any questions in the audience? Can you now use your chance to address one of our experts or all of them? Please. Just a second, you have a mic, yes.
Hello, I'm Elina Melkin from the University of Vaasa, working as a professor of practice. Money makes the world go around. It's interesting that Germany has chosen not to rely on nuclear power. At the same time, they are making business with Russia. So is the money there the real issue or what? And this is for Timo.
So the question is that is there money?
Is the money key driver?
I guess for those companies and investors who are in that field, the money is the main driver. And it is so that many companies, for example, as we saw in those other slides, that companies are now requiring that they would like to buy energy, but it has to be green. So it means that they are willing to pay a little bit more for green energy than something other energy. And of course investors can see that, and they invest in green energy because it's a good investment at that moment, because somebody is going to buy the energy. So I think that for investors, the main driver is the return.
Simon, I'm from the Zambian embassy in Stockholm. Now my question, is going to come from a human point. I'll not talk like a diplomat. Looking at Europe and the Nordics in particular, you've made quite some significant steps towards this transition to safer and cleaner, sustainable energy. Africa is lagging behind by far. And then the professor there has made a chilling statement in the beginning that 50 years from now, if we don't do anything, we may not exist as human beings. Are there any deliberate steps for Europe to collaborate with Africa in this fight? And also looking at Africa holding the largest deposits of critical minerals, and mining those is still going to affect the environment in Africa. I would like to get a comment from your panel there. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Who wants to start?
Well, I could start from the point of view that climate change is also very much about like global justice, and we know that the poorest areas in the world are usually like most impacted by climate change. So that's one thing in this discussion. Then I think what we have discussed regarding renewable energy and providing power to areas where there was no electricity, like that renewable energy would actually be a very good solution there. Then in those areas there wouldn't be need to go the same route that has been taken in the areas which started with the fossil fuels. Maybe I'll let Timo to continue.
Yeah, what is fair and what is not. The problem now in Africa and in Far East that the GDP per capita GDP as itself is very low compared to, for example, Europe. So of course it's fair that they will grow, and because of this growth, the CO2 emissions will grow over there much more rapidly than in here. So everybody, I guess, thinks that it's fair that the GDP over there grows. And if we think that this is fair, then we have to understand that it's also fair that the CO2 emissions in those areas, it will keep on growing. So I guess we can't do anything. If they want to grow, they have to increase the emissions as well. And that's a big problem. And from that respect, I think that in Europe and in US, so we have to do so that we reduce our emissions to almost zero, and negative if it's possible. So we have to do that one, so that the other ones can grow. But the problem for the whole world is that it means then that the emissions are still growing, and that's bad. So I don't know what is the answer for this problem.
Should we somehow offer, what do you think, should we offer support, and what kind of support for those growing, developing countries in their energy transition, or let's say, I don't know if it's a transition, but in developing their system in a way that takes this these goals of green transition into account and builds them into the systems. What kind of support could we offer from the Western countries? Yes.
Well, actually, answering a little bit more to that and this question at the same time, I think one of the key aspects is also empowering from bottom up. There's a tendency to have this idea that we come from Europe or the US and we will tell you how to do things. And Africa, for example, has a lot of different cultures in one huge like the continent. And the people will have different logics, different ways of how dealing with reality and how they want to envision and develop their lives. And I think there's a fine balance with this thing that let's go and bring our knowledge and help them in like, okay, let's go there and see what they really need and how can we boost the local business, how can we actually like help them help people give them ideas from what we have learned and the technologies, and then let the decisions come from the local or the region or the country. And we have in Finland there's this Energy Village project, and I know we are working with some projects now, for example, in some countries in Africa, where it is more like first understanding what's there. Like what do you actually have, what kind of natural resources, renewable resources, and also what kind of education. So once again, it's not just the energy and how we can, cut the emissions. It's also like having people who can help people there to understand what are the good, like what available renewable resources and what kind of human resources do you also have, and how to work with that. So I may be twisting this a little bit, but my idea is that it's not always that we go and help and support. It's also enabling us to learn something from cultures which are doing things differently, but it might be very good ways of handling. And sometimes people have very sustainable ways of living already. And so it requires quite a lot of reflexivity, in my opinion, from researchers or people who go to work in different projects.
Thank you. Was there a question in the back? Yeah.
Maybe off topic or maybe not. Should our Western society prepare for not being dependent on economic growth, 3% growth every year or something, 2%, whatever? And if so, how on earth should that be done? It's not the typical main topic in political elections that now we don't aim for economical growth anymore, but I think it's important.
Well, if we want to keep our standard of living, we want to have everybody have a job and so on, so we have to increase our GDP. Of course, we can choose not to do that, but it means then that our standard of living will go down, and not everybody has a job, and eventually somebody will have hunger and so on. And also, maybe we could have a little bit lower standard of living in the Western world, but when we look at some undeveloped countries, we can't ask them not to increase their GDP. They have to increase their GDP if they want to live a decent life. And the problem in those countries is that if they want to increase their GDP, they have to invest a lot in industries, for example, steel making and so on. And that takes a lot of fossil fuel. We can't still do it in any other way, even in Western countries. So if we want that the whole world will industrialize, then it means that our CO2 emissions, for example, they will grow still quite a lot.
Do you want to continue, Petra?
Maybe you want to say first?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very difficult question. Of course, it's in order to mitigate climate change, we also have to reduce our consumption. We cannot do all this like mitigation only by technological means, but how to do the reduction in consumption and in a realistic way, in a way that we don't like decrease this. I think we can have kind of similar standard of living still by consuming less, but we need to change the thinking of people.
Yeah, I think like Western people in general would benefit from some sort of downshifting, but I'm not talking about this because still we need a strong middle class, for example, to have a good well-being society. And what we're seeing right now is that we are actually struggling with the situation right now, that more people are going to the, let's say, poor side, and fewer are going to the rich. So we are kind of losing out on the middle class in Europe and the Nordics as we speak, because, well, let's not go there. But I think one of the things is that we are tying the growth to material stuff. And I may be being like too far out flying right now with my ideas, but I think like, especially with the digitalization as well, that there is also a lot of this kind of intangible resources, knowledge-based business and so on, which is once again, there's a lot of opportunities there. And I don't know, because I'm not dealing with numbers as much as Timo and businesses like this, but I think there must also be a way of growing also on this, more on this intangible side, and not tying everything to these earth resources and material resources. On the other hand, I also know how the plans for the energy transition and especially the green transitions are looking, for example, in the Nordics and Europe, and that involves a terrible amount of new infrastructure, which is totally going to, once again, we have to get it from the earth, and we have to get more like raw materials. So that's, I don't see that growth we would need to stop growing the economy, but we would need to grow it in a way that is the money it comes from somewhere else than always from ownership. I think this is one of the problems behind the idea of free energy, that if we would ever get as far with the technological innovations that we would be producing that free energy, then there would be absolutely no business in energy except for services, because the technology would be a one-time investment, and yes, maybe the TSOs, so the transmission operators, distributors would still have a role, but we would lose out on all these raw materials. And I think that's a bit of a trick as well here, that money is right now there. So are we kind of shifting to a new economy? Maybe that's what we have to do, but what is it? Okay, sorry, I'm philosophizing here, but...
Really good points, Algo. And yeah, what I took from this was that we need a stronger middle class. And also back to the root causes that you mentioned, that our standard of living, is it something that we need to maintain such as it is? Can we lower it a bit? And this ties to what you said about consumption as a safety or something like that in your presentation, that our standard of living is so much tied to material things, and consumption brings a safety. And is this something that we can maybe change on a level of thinking or level of ideals, cultural ideals, and how? I think it's a fascinating question. Do we have, yes, thank you. Is it?
It's working,
Yes.
okay, sorry. My name is Göran Sundin, and I've been with ABB for something 35 years, living abroad, 6.5 years in Asia, and visiting there regularly, those 9 big countries. There, there we have half of the population on Earth, and coming back here and listening to all the discussions and reading all what is written, I have a feeling that in all these messages is an element of we have to feel guilty for what we are doing, which is completely wrong. You go to the shop and buy some meatballs, and you should look how many CO2 grams they have cost. We are 5 million in this country, and it's very little we can do except for inventing new products that are cost efficient. And Timo is so right in saying that it's still, I guess here in OECD, Poland is still building new coal power plants, and not talking about India. So we should not be feeling so guilty in what we are doing here in these different matters. That's my message.
Thank you. Do you want to continue from this, or should we take them? Okay. Do you want to respond to this? Should we feel guilty? Is there any potential in our Western consumer guilt, or not?
Well, I would say that we need to carry our responsibility, even if we are a small nation and our own impact is small compared to like some other nations which are bigger. Of course, we still need to carry our own responsibility. Maybe the feeling of like feeling guilty is not the most powerful way of changing things. We need to see also opportunities and find other ways around this, but still we need to carry our responsibility.
Yeah, and I guess that we have to show example, so that's important. So we know that the Finnish, what we do here, it's not so important in the big picture, but it's very important that we show example, so the other ones can follow. We can't ask anybody to do something if we don't first do it ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. Now, guilt is good to wake you up, but then it's not good for action. So it's a bit with that doom, boom, boom thing that if you just get bombarded with things to feel guilty about, you will in the end just freeze into inaction. There's like nothing makes sense anymore. We can see it with our young people today, that there's a lot of people feeling really guilty about just breathing. I mean, that's not really supposed to be good for society, especially if we want babies in the future as well. So maybe a bit careful with the guilt. So I totally agree that we have reached a certain guilt limit now, especially from, I would say, to the media, that we could find some solutions soon, which are not just based upon that.
Very nice points and nice insight from the audience. Yes, there was the next question.
Hello, my name is Nikos Hadjigeorgiou. I'm professor at the University of Athens in Greece and part-time professor at the University of Vaasa. So my question is the following. How do you evaluate, or can you comment on the more synergetic activities of citizens like local energy communities in this new energy transition environment? I think this question touches upon all three panelists, because the question is, do they can form a viable business model or financial model? How is the role in this new transition? Also, as they are building normally smaller works, they have obviously much less environmental impact. And finally, obviously, energy communities raise awareness and are very good for making people more engaged and more actively involved in the energy transition. So I would be very interested to hear your views in these new actors.
Want me to start?
Yes.
EU is very much talking about the citizens' involvement and stakeholder involvement, and everybody's involved and all of that. The problem in our expert society is that the technology is very complex. The complexities of what we're trying to do is usually very abstract, and the way we bring it on to the local level, what I've been following different cases is that many times it is a top-down project which is then kind of made into, now you, dear citizens, are here to decide together how it's going to look here, while it's already decided basically what's going to be done. So it's more about actually having the people accept it one way or another. And when you look at citizen opposing to, for example, wind power, you will see that usually the people who never wanted to attend a meeting because they don't even feel they should be there. That's again like who gets invited, who doesn't get invited. Or the people who would have liked to really discuss it and they were never really given the opportunity because they had actually a very different perspective. And then you have the investment, so you have the power hierarchies inside that society. That's also very socioculturally inscribed, that who gets to talk, who doesn't get to talk. And adding to that depends on what kind of culture. Finland has a very strong shaming culture. We don't talk about that, but it means that people don't really want to speak up, especially if they have a very different opinion to the one that's driven. And I see this is a very typical way of wanting to do good, because the group who brings something to the village thinks this is the best solution, but we have, in many cases, there is a risk that you don't really hear the people in that region, the community, the village, and actually give space first. So it's like half of the decision is already made before we start involving people. And I would say that's one of the really big issues why we have so much resistance, and also sometimes we should maybe stop the plan if it really shows that this is not the place. So that's my experience actually with this collectivism and this kind of involving a lot of citizens, that you have to be very careful how you approach it and who you send there and how flexible they are in allowing different people and different perspectives. Sorry, that was a bit critical again.
Sylvia, do you have something from your perspective?
Well, I think like citizen engagement is very important. It should be done more and more, and in renewable energy, when these projects they come close to people, it's important to have the local support. But I agree with you that we need to be careful how to do this, like what decisions can be made, like for example by the different citizen groups where you need then the experts, and what are the different phases where you involve the communities. But I do think that in general it's a very important thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our time is almost up. Do you want to have the last word, Timo, about communities and citizen involvement?
About communities, I think that money talks. We can see, for example, landowners. Nobody wanted any windmills in their backyard, but then they started paying for those. And nowadays they pay quite a lot. Now everybody wants a windmill in their backyard. So money talks.
These are our famous last words. Now I really want to thank our fantastic panelists, experts, and also you, our active audience. So thank you.
Thank you.